This is Greg Kesich. I'm the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald, and I'm here with the Sunday columnists on a Monday with Cynthia Dill, just fresh back from Rhode Island, Caron, and Bill Nemitz.
Howdy.
And so we're looking ahead at this week, and we usually reflect on the news, but I think we maybe can reflect a little bit on something that hasn't happened, and that's a state budget. LePage dropped his budget plan on the legislature in the state back in January, and everybody said, yep, okay, thanks, and moved away. And this is always an obscure process, but this time it's just a total black box. The Appropriations Committee hasn't come out in public to discuss what they're working on since last Monday, and that was just to say that the House Republicans were not coming out of their office, and so that they were done for the day. That's the last thing they've done on Mike. Some are, if you do the math, it looks like they need to come up with an agreement by the end of next week if they're going to be able to avoid a shutdown, assuming that the governor is going to veto the budget and take the full 10 days that he's allowed. And why wouldn't he? He's done it the last 2 times, and he's pretty much said as much this time. And the real stumbling block to get this thing going is the question 2, voter-approved 3% surcharge on incomes above $200,000, which affects 2% of Maine taxpayers. And Republicans have said, absolutely not. We draw the line in the sand. We're going to go into state shutdown to avoid this. And Democrats have said, we draw the line in the sand. We're going to 55% of education funding. But they haven't really said that they're going to go with the surcharge. So
well, the Democrats haven't used the shutdown word either.
No.
Correct? Yeah, they're loath to do that.
Right. As should everybody.
Right.
Be. Yeah. Put 10,000 people out of work. But could we see another shutdown? We haven't had one in 25 years.
Oh, right. And it still seems like yesterday, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of the collective
And how did
memory.
that work?
Yeah, disastrously for everyone.
Did it? Was it a disaster?
Yes, it was a disaster for the governor.
You know, if you look at the Republicans' position here, here in the state, and let's say this happens, and as you pointed out, Greg, it's we're talking about a very, very small fraction of Maine people who are actually affected by this thing. It kind of begs the question: how many more monkey wrenches do you want to throw into the 2018
That's
election?
what I was thinking. This is like
the
perfect storm for Democrats. You have Trump on the federal stage creating
Right.
lots of opportunities
Right.
and openings. And then in the state of Maine, if Republicans shut down the government because of 2% of the people who live mostly in Democratic districts, aren't going to get a tax cut, that's just a bizarre, aren't going to get a tax.
We're going to get a tax
Right.
increase.
And it's just that could be really good for
But
Democratic
what they will
candidates.
do, and it's all going to be about how, if they push it that far, how are you going to message this thing? And all you're going to hear about is the Democrats are raising taxes, and you won't hear a peep about on whom.
Yeah.
And if that filters down and catches fire with enough of the the LePage base, it becomes a political force.
I can't imagine it's a serious threat, and I can't imagine that Democrats won't call a bluff. I mean, we're talking about overriding a vote of the people of Maine
Right.
by shutting down government. One of those things is bad enough. If you do them in
Double whammy.
combination,
Right.
it's potentially fatal in 2018. So I can't imagine they'll follow through.
Well, over that 25 years, there have been many times when at this point in early to or mid to late May, at least one, if not both sides, are tossing the shutdown word around pretty freely. So
I can see why they think it would work, and it's because they've done such a good job of messaging taxation as something that affects everybody. And people, when they hear a tax increase on the top income, they hear we'll have the highest tax rate in the country, and they make the case that all these high-earning people will leave the state. They'll go to one of their other 5 homes.
But they made all those arguments during the campaign.
correct.
Every one of them, and they lost the campaign.
And I think that what the polling showed when they were doing their advertisements was people were less moved by more money for schools than they were by take money away from the rich guy. Yeah, that turned out to be the thing.
Yeah. So they're going to run that argument again.
Yeah.
But shut down government to get everyone's attention.
Well, I think it's part of this broad attack on the referendum process. You know, this is just one side of the story, because they're also, you know, trying to maneuver around the casino referendum, and they've taken some mild degree of success in the minimum wage referendum question that had the tip credit, but apparently now that's been changed. Marijuana was a referendum question that the Republicans are trying to own and change. So this tax issue, it seems to me, it's important, but it's also symbolic of what the Republicans think about the referendum process and how it takes away their power.
They loved it when they were initiating referendums. Right. And remember, it isn't long ago that the promised to initiate like 5 referendums and lead the Republicans to the top of the mountain. None of them happened, but they all loved the idea then, and when they were doing all of the tax, local tax reform budgets. Now they hate it.
What's interesting?
Democrats are winning on it.
Yeah, right. What's interesting to me is this whole budget discussion taking place behind closed doors, the Republicans, not coming out on mic. That was the case when the economy was crashing. We had to cut the budget significantly because there was less revenue. Now, I mean, Maine's kind of flush with cash.
What's the problem?
That's the problem. And it just goes to show you that it's not necessarily a lack of money. It's a budget document really supposedly is a reflection of the state's values, and there's some serious divisions between Republicans and Democrats, and so much of it is just symbolic. I really believe it's just symbolic. It's not really about the 3% tax on families making $200,000. It was a referendum question. There's other things that they're fighting.
So what's the symbolism that motivates the anti 3% people? Like what is that? I agree with you. I think it's a very strong emotional reaction people have to that 3% surcharge. But what is it?
I think there's this connection in their minds between the education budget and teachers' unions. And so they think any extra money for education is just a way of unions squeezing the state budget for their members, and that it's the Democrats working for the teachers' unions trying to get more money into their hands. And they say that additional funds for education do not show improved educational outcomes, and that we're spending enough. We just have to change. We need more charter schools. We need to get rid of the superintendents. They feel that education reform really has to take place at a kind of at their level, like, tighten the belt, take personal responsibility.
Because at the same time, in vilifying the unions, they'll also simultaneously preach the message of we need to give teachers more help inside the classroom, And it's very interesting how they've kind of, driven a wedge between the people who actually educate our children and the union that represents them. Because, nobody dares say a bad word about teachers per se now, but it's always the unions, the union bosses who are in control of this whole process. But I just don't think that's going to fly. I really don't. I think that Alan, you hit it right on the head. This is something the voters passed, and to pull it out from under them in this dramatic a way, I think would be. I agree, it would be catastrophic. I don't agree that it's not going to happen. I think that things are so polarized up there. I would hesitate to predict at this point
if
who's going to blink first.
In my view, it would be because the governor wants it to happen. Mm-hmm. It's worth noting, we talked about this 6 months ago, and the governor sort of losing authority, losing power, losing leverage. He's gotten almost nothing out of this session, which in many ways is his last session. Mm-hmm. He's in his last week in many ways to get anything done. And we're talking about all the power being centered in that link between the two parties over the budget. We're not talking about LePage.
Right.
So this is his last shot.
Anything he's going to do is assumed at this point.
It's done.
Well, he
ineffective.
can not put up signs to tell you where the national park is. He can like single-handedly throw his body down on to preserve the deposit-free NIPS.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, he's
But
reduced
he
to talking
cannot.
about
He can
nips.
stop things from happening, but he can't make anything happen.
Right.
I think where we're going to see compromise, I don't think there's going to be a government shutdown. I think the Appropriations Committee is going to work out a budget, and it's going to be voted on by 2/3 of the legislature. I don't think
Which is the normal procedure now.
Yeah, and I don't think the polarization as dramatic this session. I don't really sense when you're up in Augusta that it is so polarized. The House, for instance, House Republicans are actually overriding a pretty substantial number of the governor's vetoes. But where I see the fertile, this is my prediction, is the fertile ground for compromise on this 3% is the Republicans are going to get some more about charter schools. You know, with Betsy DeVos in and this push for extended charter schools and the opportunities for families to have choice and vouchers and blah, 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 blah. That's what I think is going to be the compromise. You heard it here.
Okay,
In exchange for the 3%.
lawmakers,
Yeah.
that's it. That's it. There's your compromise. Everybody can go home. Let's move on. From Augusta to Washington, both Alan and Cynthia wrote this week about the I word, impeachment, about whether we should be cranking it out yet. Cynthia made the case that it's not going to happen. That at least not from what we've seen so far. Alan argued that it shouldn't happen, right?
No, I didn't argue that it shouldn't happen. I argued that we ought to hold the powder, keep the powder dry for a while and see if there's actually any evidence.
Yeah.
There's this great fervor around rumors about memos and what they say and what actually happened. We haven't seen any.
We've got all the drama, but we don't have an actual
Well, what
script.
about Trump saying to Lester Holt, "Yeah, I did it because of the Russian investigation."
Yeah.
You know, I thought when
that's kinda like
when
a
he
little
said
like-
that when he said that it was you know that TV commercial where the robbers come in and the guy says, "I'm a bank monitor. This is a robbery."
Yeah,
you know, it's happening right before your eyes. I turned to my wife when he said that and I said, "I think what he just did is a crime.
Yeah.
I think he just admitted to a crime." You know?
Except that in order
all
to
about intent,
find
right?
that it's a crime, it'll take a majority of House Republicans,
Right.
and there's
Yeah,
no way that they are going to say that what he said. I hope there's just no way.
But the other route here, and I think I agree with you, Alan. I mean, in terms of the special counsel, this isn't even out of the blocks yet. Right. But the question is, what kind of evidence is going to be out there that was presentable to a grand jury that in turn could change the political equation on Capitol Hill? Right. I think it's going to have to come in that door. In order, there are going to have to be some indictments here in order for this to get any traction on the Hill. But you look at what Flynn said today. He was taking the fifth with the Senate Intel Committee, and translation, he's holding out. For number one, he wants to read the indictment before he decides on how he's going to.
Well, he was asking for immunity.
Yeah,
they wouldn't give it to him.
Right.
They can't give it
but
to him. No.
I think that it's just too soon. We just don't know. No. We don't know what kind of evidence they have, what they're going to come up with.
Turned out to be a huge mistake to give Oliver North immunity back in whenever that was, 87.
Right. Yeah.
And I hope that the investigation, special counsel's investigation, kind of takes precedence and they do whatever it is that they're going to do, and we can focus more on the stuff that Congress is trying to do. Which to me has a lot more impact on my life than whether or not who was that guy, Paul Manafort, bought some dachas in the Crimea.
When I think about investigating the Trump campaign, I mean, just think about that for a minute. There was probably no organized way of record keeping. I'm sure there wasn't a roster of employees with their background checks. I'm sure there is no recording of meetings,
the Russians
minutes.
have them.
Exactly.
So I mean,
offered to share them.
It was just think of how
Honest to God,
chaotic.
the Russians are sitting on a treasure trove right now.
Oh, and I'm sure those are completely reliable, admissible documents in a United States investigation. I mean, I just don't believe that there's going to be the kind of evidence that federal prosecutors are used to when they try to dive into the Trump campaign, because it was so chaotic. I mean, they just had people coming and going and shooting from the hip, and Donald Trump tweeting away.
There are records that people leave even when they're in chaos, and so I think you and I are in a sense agreeing that if you look at what we have today. There's insufficient grounds for impeachment. People shouldn't really be talking about it with such great energy. But that doesn't mean that 6 months from now, there may be things that emerge that change the political dynamics. And the same thing happened in Watergate. Nobody in the world believed early on in Watergate, when the break-in was first the issue, or even that it began to move up the ladder, nobody believed that it would lead to impeachment. It took a while, and as each little bomb dropped, public opinion incrementally moved.
Well, it took the tapes, too.
It took the tapes.
Really,
the tapes,
if it hadn't been for the tapes.
But it ended up that the issue became the effort to obstruct more than what the initial, the cover-up, more than the initial action.
And Trump is conducting his cover-up right out in the open.
That's the thing. He's like
everyone
Paul
to see.
LePage. Unlike Watergate, where you had a respectable presidency, whether you agreed with President Nixon or not, for the most part, it had legitimacy.
A lawyer, really sneaky.
But there wasn't quite. Whereas you look at, in my mind, the comparison is more to Paul LePage, where he also when you think about what Trump has said, and this is what I touched on in my column, that, he said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Ave and still get votes. He called, name-called, accused Ted Cruz's father of murder, said
murder of John F. Kennedy.
The Gold Star family, were, the federal judge was a hater. He has said such outrageous things that people are sort of immune to it. So I just see, just like in LePage, when he first came onto the scene and would say all these outrageous things, there were calls for impeachment, and he got reelected. Because besides what he's saying and what Trump is saying, the Republicans are like, oh, great, immigration arrests up, Planned Parenthood funding, that's, we've got that down, funding for contraception down. Their goals are being achieved. They voted on repealing and replacing Obamacare. They got Gorsuch.
They voted in the House. They don't have any
but those are the
action
guys who have to vote to impeach. They're happy. They're happy. Trump is helping them.
Right, and again, the question is if this evolves forward to a different ground, then the conversation changes. And that was my point. Why are you talking about impeachment?
And it's dangerous if it looks like a coup of the elites.
Right, exactly.
Removing, the people's choice.
I think part of the problem for Trump is that he got away with all that stuff in the campaign. And he thinks you can act as president in the same way you did as candidate. And he's finding out, I think, the hard way that that leads to investigations, it leads to independent counsel. And if he doesn't stop it, it'll lead to something else.
I just see a real danger that some on the left are too happy. Their Schadenfreude is just too glowing. I do think everybody should look inside themselves and try to hope for a successful United States presidency. I just do think it's a civic duty to want the president to succeed. Certainly to be critical and to, fight for change or advocate for what you want to be different policy, but this vibe that is picking up about just wanting him to fail is going to backfire.
But you have to define the problem in this political environment is you have to define the word success. And different people have vastly different perspectives of what that word means. For some people, success might be, a month of peace and quiet. Whereas with other people, tweets. Success is going to be the tax reform that they may or may not get to, and all the various other things. So, I think when a lot of people look at what Trump stands for and what he campaigned on, and what we think striving to accomplish, they wouldn't define that he would define it as a successful presidency, but a lot of the people who oppose him wouldn't.
I was thinking of that today, that when he first came into office, we were talking about the opposition coalescing and coming up with sort of an anti-Trump message, and that would be an answer to the same kind of concerns that led to the kind of nativist, populist, America first, old-fashioned economics argument. And it turns out the anti-Trump isn't coming from the opposition. It's Trump himself. Trump's actual policy is very different than what he ran against.
Right.
And if he is able to hide behind these investigations, this constant drip, 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 nitpick, witch hunt. Right. Nobody's ever had such a witch hunt as me.
Right.
It covers up the fact that he is not delivering on what he said he was going to deliver, and that he's gone into a very conventional Paul Ryan type conservative policy agenda that is not what people voted for.
Right.
And I think that this is kind of, in a weird way, I saw it during the campaign, and it's hard to believe it, but he benefits from the chaos.
Yes, and LePage benefited from the chaos.
Right.
I mean, it becomes the reality of the administration.
Yeah.
And so for people who say 5 months in, this can't go on like this, well, I would beg to differ.
Yeah.
It actually can.
Right.
And it just becomes kind of the business of the day, to where we all feel like we're on vacation if there's no crisis going on, and I think that's what we're going to have.
And that chaos is apparently, in some respects, thanks to Steve Bannon, right? I mean, his whole theory of the campaign was to create absolute chaos. And but in terms of success, like if the Democrats and the president agree that reducing the corporate tax rate is a good thing, my point is that I hope that all this distraction around whether he's going to be impeached or whether Flynn's going to be jailed and all the palace drama between the who's who in the White House, that some things where there is some common ground between the president, the Republicans, the Democrats, infrastructure, obviously there's some differences on how much and where, but there's some things that, I just think as Americans, people should not want the president to fail at everything. Right. And not be able to do anything. I think that's
and Trump hasn't needed any help.
Right.
I mean, most of what has happened has been self-inflicted.
I would say 100%.
And to me, I want to keep watching the bottom line. What actually comes out of his first year?
Yeah.
And we're getting near the finish line in Congress in the first year also. So this is supposed to be the big year, right? 1 and 5. That's where the big stuff happens. And they don't have a lot. I mean, you ticked off a few things that they've gotten, but they're losing in a lot of areas. Well, they're losing the momentum, and this is what frustrated, I think, both Senate and House leaders. I mean, come on, we've just lost a month here. And so I think that the real effect of this impeachment talk and the broader conversation is that it kind of paralyzes the administration at the time when they should have maximum power. Right. And they're not, and healthcare is a great example. They're not going to get healthcare. So
that's
out of the
one
Senate.
of the things they really teed that up is the first thing, that they said they can't do tax reform until they've done healthcare.
Right.
They managed to get a bill through the House. There's a group of 13 men in the Senate that are allegedly putting together a bill that will pass the House, but we don't know that it can pass the Senate. Senator Collins doesn't think it can. And we're also hearing that in addition to the Medicaid cuts in the Obamacare repeal, that the president's budget would also have major cuts to Medicaid program that affects something like a third of the people in Maine. Are they going to get anything done here? And should we root for them to succeed?
Well, certainly not rooting for them to succeed in gutting Medicaid in order to reduce the corporate tax rate for the super rich. No. Definitely, that would not be a success. But I think the federal budget and the numbers around the budget and their relation to healthcare is, I don't see any resolution other than Obamacare surviving with some tweaks and a new name. I just don't see anything else happening. I mean, Ted Cruz on the committee of senators, it's going to bring everybody together.
Yeah, there's no way the Senate could hold this together.
I just don't think it's going to happen. Yeah.
And even, you say they're going to come up with something that's palatable to the House. We have no idea how the House is going to react to whatever the Senate comes up with. I mean, there are going to be things in it that are going to become poison pills for one or another small faction, whether it's within the Freedom Caucus or whether it's among the moderate Republicans. This thing on the rebound is going to run into the same brick wall that they ran into early on when they were trying to come up with their own repeal plan. It is such a delicate balance. What came out of the House is so precariously balanced that it's not going to take much to throw it into disarray again. So good luck to the Senate getting something passed, but then even more so, good luck to the conference in actually agreeing on a final piece of legislation.
And the House had powerful incentives to come up with something that they could celebrate at the White House. Something, anything, because they're all running for re-election.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed some face-saving.
They'd been sitting on all that beer for months.
Right.
You know?
And so
to come up with something.
But I can't imagine that the Senate's going to act on this year. Maybe not next year because it's an election year. The study is very complicated. There's no way they can get anything like that House bill through the Senate.
No.
There's no way you can get the Senate bill that would pass, in my opinion, through the House.
Right.
So does that take the House members who voted for it off the hook if nothing gets passed? Like when Bruce Poliquin comes back to campaign?
I think so.
Believe me, they're reading the polls in those districts very carefully.
What Bruce will say is, I voted for it to move the process forward, and I fully intended when it came back to the House to make it a more acceptable bill. But alas, I never got that chance.
I got my opportunity.
That's right.
He would say that if he spoke to the press.
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
But you're not saying he'd straddle that issue. So I don't think they get through that through. I don't think they do anything on health care, really, that's meaningful. And I agree with you entirely. It's going to end up being rename it, and there'll be a 10% change from Obamacare, and that's all they're going to get out of it. When you have Susan Collins and others saying, we want more people covered, not less,
Yeah,
that's a problem for Medicaid.
and she's not alone.
Yeah.
She's not just one or two. There's a good half dozen of them there who are saying the same thing, and I would expect to act accordingly.
And how do they pivot to tax reform? How do they get the infrastructure? They're running out of time.
I think Trump is going to soon realize that it's impossible to cut any deals with Congress, and so he's going to maybe look like he's on this international trip, just perhaps look to cut some deals abroad. I'm sure he's just dying to cut a deal. I mean, that's what the guy does. You know, it's like,
I want to see him cut a deal with the Pope.
Well,
that might happen.
Save his soul.
The Saudis, and then they gave a lot of money to his daughter's foundation. So.
Right.
No, but he must be a little bit irritated that China and India's pollution rates have dropped substantially because of Obama's great negotiation at the Paris Accord. I mean, you know, these kind of little successes, these things are the kinds, you know, I mean, Obama cut some great deals on climate internationally, the trade deals. I think Trump's going to soon realize that Congress is not my party, that he can't put that together, the Senate and the House, but that as the chief executive, he can, you know, cut some deals.
You know, when Obama signed Obamacare, Joe Biden said something we can't probably say on the, you know, big effing deal.
Big deal.
And
we call it friggin'.
Yeah, and he was right, I guess, right? I mean, that was a big deal.
I think
at the time,
issue.
Everybody kind of derided it on the left, saying it was you know,
not good enough,
but pale beer and not good enough. And
oh my God! And then two years later, the Democrats they abandoned Obama. Democrats running said that Obamacare wasn't good. I was so disappointed and disgusted with how few Democrats came forward and actually supported what had happened because it wasn't perfect. It's like, are you kidding me?
But it's really hard to get things done. Our system of government makes it really hard to get things done, and it makes it, even if you control all the levers, it's hard to make it work.
And this is where the conversations around the establishment versus outsiders comes into play. If you want to get something done, you need some people who know what they're doing politically. I mean, it is a process. You do have to get the right people at the table and make the deals. And that's where I think, like Nancy Pelosi and some of these people have been down in Washington for a while who did get Obamacare done. I mean, they knew how to move the levers.
He was back 25 years ago, however long ago. He knew what a hurdle that was, and he knew what difficulty the Clinton administration had with it. And it was a huge deal. And there is no way that Donald Trump has the political acumen that either Obama or the people with whom he worked have right now. So if you look at it just in terms of that, the political chops, we're dead in the water.
Right. I mean, the unfortunate
But
thing
we're
is
insured.
that there's millions of people who aren't insured, and as good as big a deal as it wasn't as good as we need. And I just can't see Washington coming together and making it better.
No.
Which, well, that's kind of a down note.
Yeah,
Let's
thanks
leave it.
for
Let's
the
leave it
downer.
at that.
So
Have a nice week,
Spring in
folks.
our
it's almost
step
summer.
Yeah.
Washington screws us again.
That's right. That's right. Well, we can all get ready to welcome Trump back.
Yeah.
Keep our fingers
I have a
crossed
friend
this
who's
week that he holds it
speculating that he's not coming back. He's just going to defect.
He's coming.
He's going to seek asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy.
He's going to be like Kim Philby, just disappear and show up in Moscow.
Not
He's
to
got
open
that
this,
great place
not to
in
reopen
Scotland.
this issue, but he's coming back to the Comey
Right.
appearance, which I think is going to be wall-to-wall news for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And I was just saying before we started that an old Republican friend sent a message today saying, yeah, well, all that impeachment stuff is gone since the president went overseas. I said, yeah, he's coming back. What's happening the next day?
Right. And how does foreign policy poll with Trump's base?
Right.
Somewhere down between 0 and nothing. So it's an escape.
Yeah.
It's not much
But timely
else.
and long.
That's right.
escape.
Well, I think that will wrap it up there. Thanks, everybody.
Have
See
a great
ya.
week.
Thanks for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast. Make sure you never miss a podcast episode by subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. For more of our podcasts, visit pressherald.com/podcasts. Follow the link there to this episode to leave a comment. You can also leave a comment on our Facebook page. I'm Chad Gilley. Once again, thank you for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast.